So everyone, let me introduce our speaker, Roshan from Traceable. He'll be speaking on dissecting techniques to shoot API arrows at vulnerable services. So everybody, as you assuming that you are just familiar with from the previous session, you can just network, ask questions in the Q&A pod, chat in the chat section, and answer the polls that are given by Roshan. If you have any, and we don't miss any of the questions by asked by you. Okay, let me give the stage to Roshan. So yes, Roshan, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Yeah. Uh, Before we begin, just a quick introduction about me. Yeah. I'm a security research engineer at Traceable AI. We build API security solution using distributed tracing as a backbone. Distributed tracing is fairly new to many people. So if you want to understand or learn how, you can just go ahead on the Traceable website and try it. Yeah. And I have been an API hacker for long. Yeah, building security tools and solutions on every enterprise I have been working with, and API security researcher for past 4 years. Before that, I used to do database security research and many other small research as well. So the best thing that I have done to keep myself like very focused and uh, like basically get success is I never left my developer roots. I code every day, and that is one of the reasons why I am always familiar with the language that developers use, and uh, I would also suggest you the same. Yeah. So before we proceed, I would just like a quick poll to understand basically how you have been familiar with the APIs. Yeah. So come on, guys, what? Yeah. I would like to know who my audience is so I can speak to them. I think unknowingly or knowingly, we have been using APIs every day. It's just a matter of how well we observe them, because the APIs have been there like in everything you use, my our phones, language, even smart TVs, or even the smallest bulbs that we have. Yeah, they have APIs, smart bulbs. So yeah, I think yeah, let's close the poll and we'll take it further. So I see, yeah, we have both kinds of audiences who have been very familiar with APIs, using them every day, and some of the people who use them on a daily basis. Yeah. Okay, so our agenda will be basically a small introduction to APIs. I'm not going to go detail explain about how APIs and what they are. Yeah, but I will talk about the API security landscape, how it is today, and yeah, and we'll talk about just get a brief overview on the WASP API top 10. Uh, we will also learn about how to discover APIs in our environment and why do we want to do that. Yeah, API as well behavior correlations. Yeah, some of the API attack vectors and generic vectors. And yeah, in the end, we'll take questions. You can also go ahead and ask questions anytime. Yeah, we'll keep it an interaction session. If you don't understand anything, just go ahead and try to ask. Yeah. If there are too many, we'll schedule a separate session to discuss on anything important. But yeah, please go ahead and always ask your questions. So we have known APIs as like the building blocks of modern applications supporting communications between different services, and even the smallest devices of everything that we use today is built on API. So APIs have become like the atomic communication structure between if you see as a services, right? All the microservice world we are building in, it's become the atomic communication structure between different services. Yeah. Now they come in various forms. Some of them, yeah, you may know fairly common as like REST APIs. Yeah, there are GraphQL versions of APIs, RPC service communications, gRPC, yeah, XRPC, many of them, yeah. And WebSockets for like faster engagement between services. Yeah. And so this is one of the legacy technologies. Yeah. And we have much more. Yeah. APIs allows very deeper engagement with data and services, because in the end, all you want with APIs is to basically interact with something or someone and basically get the results. So it's all about moving data from one platform to another, getting it processed and bringing it back. Yeah. So today's security landscape on APIs looks better than what it was before. Yeah, but there is still a huge gap, and uh, it will always be a struggle to basically stay on par with how the faster moving modern application development moves. So we have was API Top 10 explaining about the top vulnerabilities in the APIs that are seen. Yeah, they keep changing. So as such, the was API Top 10 will change. Yeah. There are also very less tool focused on just API security, because uh, everything before was just a application bundled together. All tools got built on that. Now they are being very modeled to suit the needs of APIs, but not from scratch, like basically thinking what APIs are in design, because APIs most of the time they have a very different structure with each implementation. And because of that, the challenge lies no tool is able to keep up with them. Yeah, there are interactive tools like Burp, which do really good to some extent. But if you have ever seen like try to use a GraphQL, okay, you will need an extension for that. Yeah. So and security solutions today, that even enterprise ones, they lack like protocol support for many of their API protocols. There is a visibility challenge as well. And yeah, as we talked before, like the changing dynamics of the applications have never been up to date with the security solutions. Yeah. Also, the business use case complexity around the applications keep evolving. There are like like the use case itself is so muddled. You have to like think of even if you're like looking into one application, or like just say one of your banking services, you may see like you have just made a transfer to someone, but if you try to realize what has happened in the backend, there are so many servers interacting together, fraud detection platforms, everything that goes behind approvals. So it's like a host of interactions that goes through just from one transfer of money from one person to another. Similarly, there is like a chain of calls that happens, and that leads to basically a complex decision where and what uh, you want to see in the APIs. And also legacy designs that have been there for web applications have been onboarded to APIs. So you'll see like many of the practices are not being followed that should have been, and because of which there arises many vulnerabilities. And there is always like uh, there is always a catch-up game with basically changing the landscape or even making developers aware. Yeah. So I would just like to understand how many of you are familiar with OWASP VPA Top 10? Yeah, you would see the poll. Just go ahead and use the results. At the time, I'll just talk through this OWASP API Top 10. Basically, this was built to bring the attention of people to API security in itself. And if you see, some of these categories are very similar to WASP top 10 in itself, but they objectify a very big difference, because we want to bring attention to the focus of like the exact vulnerabilities that exist on the API. And I think we are seeing that it is uh, getting great attention and focus in the API security landscape. Yeah, so let's see. Yeah, we have like 12 of them. Yeah, 63% people. Yeah, saying yes, they are familiar with OAuth API adopting, and okay, the percentage grows. So looks like, yeah, we have a very familiar audience today, yeah, who are already working on the landscape. Cool. So everyone would have heard about bolas or idos, yeah, or like bug bounty people. I know they are very familiar with this, because this is like one of the most common vulnerabilities that they find, and everyone chases that. So basically, bola is like, you live in your house and you go ahead and uh, you can just enter someone else's house, right? Yeah, even though you don't have the keys. So that is like, you should not be able to do that. You should not be able to look at like basically others houses. Yeah, they are very different identifiers too. And similarly, yeah, it's just objects. Everything in API world is objects, and if you are able to access someone else's objects, that is basically bula, or broken object level authentication, authorization. Okay, I'll close the poll now. Yeah, thank you. So we have seen broken object level authorization, broken user authentication also is very similar. It's just not on the authorization part, but on the authentication, very clear. And it means like there are problems around the authentication, session management and stuff. Yeah. Excessive data exposure means like you're trying to give too much information that what is already needed from the APIs. Yeah. And lack of resource and rate limiting is very clear. Yeah, in its own terms. Yeah. Broken function level authorization is very interesting. I don't see many bugs being filed in these areas, but it actually exists everywhere. So I think, yeah, if you want a bigger bounty, this is a great way to get yeah, good results, because this is very less looked areas around. And mass assignment, no matter what you say, everywhere there is mass assignment, like in one form or the other. The impact may be low or high, but uh, there is mass assignment everywhere. And security misconfigurations, basically injections, including SQL injections, many other stuff. And asset management basically is like, do you know what APIs you have in your applications? Do you know how you have you handled your deprecated APIs? Are you keeping a catalog of those? So, yeah. Uh, Improper and insufficient logging and monitoring is basically getting visibility around your APIs itself. If you have visibility, because if you know, visibility is like the biggest uh, data cells really high, because visibility is like one of the biggest, like be it a developer, be it a security professional, be it a DevOps guy, everyone wants to know and understand how their APIs are working. And in the end, when there is an incident response and kicks in, they basically say there is an exploitation, and you want to understand, then is when you miss the visibility. So always having visibility is important. Now, API discovery. Why we stress on API discovery is because everything that we discuss around, like, if you don't know what to attack, if you don't know where to act on, you basically are like playing blind. Yeah. So the first thing that you always want to do is discover APIs. Yeah. No matter what the application is, no matter uh, what you're looking at, always try to discover the APIs, because basically they are like your keys to assets. Many of the time you will just be able to like just be able to look at the APIs and find a vulnerability. So having all the APIs together itself is a real asset. So manual discovery are very simple. Like look at the API specs, look at the documentations itself. Yeah, you will also find a lot of like basically regex paths embedded in the JavaScripts of the application. So look at those. You'll be able to uh, get the uh, APIs, like relative paths on the APIs itself. Yeah, even like host names, sometimes you'll get those there, or domain names. So that way you'll be able to identify which services or like domains they are going to. Yeah. Also, in many cases, like let's say you have a payment gateway and stuff, you don't want to like go ahead and discover the documentation and stuff, but many of the times you will have like integrations that are live with many of the applications you use in daily life. Look at those, and that becomes like really great way to catalog your APIs. And also, the biggest ones I have found is like campaign and marketing emails. They use hidden APIs, like they are not documented, they are evolving. They come up, go down, so they may not always be secure. So look at when you get marketing emails or campaigns from like any of the enterprises, and yeah, look at what the APIs are before behind. So this is a very interesting one. Sorry. Yeah. Also, always keep a note like APIs often have private and public and private endpoints. So in the documents and specs that you find, you'll always only find it comprised of public endpoints, not the private ones. So yeah, there are various ways that we can do discovery around those as well, like fuzzing through fuzzing and stuff. Yeah. So there are various tools I found like really uh, I wouldn't say like they are the best ones yet. I think some of you can just go ahead and build another great tool yourself. Yeah, by getting inspiration from this. But if you are looking for something like already exists, there is Kite Runner, which is an API discovery tool. Uh, API Kit, basically, it also does it's an all-in-one API kit which helps you like discover, scan, and audit APIs. Yeah. If you want to search directly for schemas, you can go to API Guru. It keeps a catalog. I think there are many other websites like this, so you'll be able to find APIs catalog. Yeah. And if you want to say like basically get GraphQL schemas, this there is a great tool called Clairvoyance, and that basically does a fuzzing part on the GraphQL and tries to discover what are the parameters. So even that is a great tool like uh, to have, and it's really fast because it does like multiple. Yeah, like in 15 seconds it can handle like 10,000 params. I think that's their claim. And if you want to discover query params, there is Arjun. Even this works in a very different way. Like basically, and it keeps a track of what the requests and responses are and compares it when it injects parameters and discovers them. Once you have basically the APIs discovered, now this is why I said first discover, because now you want to catalog them together. Yeah. And this is where it becomes really interesting because you'll be able to craft attacks that you may think that it doesn't exist, but if you have a catalog, you will be able to clearly see those and craft your attacks very fast and like save your time a lot. Yeah. So basically it's a good way to like invest the major time in the discovery, and then you can proceed with your attacks and simulations. Even for like internal users or like fraud security team members, I would say just go ahead and discover your APIs, yeah, first, if you want to, because I have found like hidden APIs in enterprises that could like take down an entire cluster in itself. So that this is a great way to basically get that impactful things in your life that you want to showcase. So now, once you have the APIs, you will want to group them for a better accuracy. Yeah. And what do you want to look at is basically look for similar schemas. If you have like multiple schemas, look for similar schemas around like uh, basically each of the API endpoint. You will see like there are similarities in between them. Like there would be, let's say, get/user/profile, and there would be get/profile directly. Both of them may be mapping to something similar, or maybe or even it may be even the same. In those cases, it may not matter, but when it is similar, they may not have like same kinds of protection. So you may want to group them together and keep a track of their schemas, and differences as well. Yeah. Also look for like different roles within the API implementation. Yeah. Uh, sorry. So I'm sorry, I just got a pop-up, and it was written for me. Okay. So now, if you want to like look for similar implementations, like there will be different APIs that are implemented. One may be in REST. There may be like a REST backend for that is implementing the GraphQL counterpart of it, or it will be like a version 1 and 2, with like version 1 being on the REST, version 2 on the GraphQL. So even like different versions of an API, V1 basically on the REST endpoint itself, like V1 and V2. V1 may have like very different features. V2 may have a little bit different features. So keep a track of all of these, like even the deprecated APIs, and look for like similar APIs even on different services, because that will help you craft a flow of the data. It may be like the APIs, the service behind that would be serving those APIs may be the same, and the external services may just be a wrapper around those. So if you are able to not target one of the APIs, you may be able to like target the same vulnerability on the other one, and that's how it makes a big difference. Also look for like different environments. I think this is something you guys would already know. Like look for staging, production, QA, beta stuff. Yeah, and that way it will uh, like help you understand what are the differences, or like what is something new in the APIs that is coming in, which might be worth testing or looking at. Yeah. And also try to understand the underlying frameworks that those APIs are built on. Like I was able to exploit one of the APIs only after like knowing that it was being served on a Magneto, because all of these frameworks, they have a very specific structure that is serving these APIs. It makes it pretty clear and obvious, like how would I want to like discover the other APIs, or like uh, what should I do next? Like maybe I am not getting any of these specs or documentations, but if I know the underlying framework, they will have a structure, and that structure will help me discover many of the APIs and like correlate between different APIs in itself. So yeah, we'll now talk about like different API attack vectors, but please do understand, like always be a responsible security professional. Always take permissions. If you're attacking someone else's infrastructure, don't go ahead and rampart anyone, because APIs are very powerful and they give you a very powerful tool in your hand. So always be a responsible security professional. Okay, so we'll just see about like some of the API attack vectors, and you would know like broken on authorization, the BOLA part. Yeah, there is always like two object level, which we call as BOLA, and function level, also known as like BAFLA in the API security world. Yeah. So both of them, though, look very similar in the calls format. One is basically like you are able to access other users' resources, the object level. Yeah. And in the role or function level, you are basically able to access a higher privilege, or like an administrative endpoint. That way, their functions or roles may differ, and you are able to do a privilege escalation kind of attack. So uh, to basically attack on an object level BOLA, you'd want to access like other users object directly. Yeah. Sometimes you may not have the resources of other users, Basically, if they are using UIDs, you will not be able to enumerate. But if it is simple IDs, you will be able to enumerate, let's say 100, 101, 102. Yeah. But if it is something like vehicle/UUID, in those cases, you may like want to discover those. So if you want to discover this endpoint, this is when you will need like where all these vehicle IDs can come from. So if you know which all API endpoints are serving this vehicle IDs, you'll be able to extract those. Like in one case, yeah, we could just look at like a profile of the user, and that profile contained all the vehicle IDs as well that the user has. So this becomes like really interesting way to extract the information using excessive data exposure, and then using that to craft Bola attacks. Similarly, at the role or function level, if you the basic thing we understand with this is like we want to do a cross role access through this. And cross role access doesn't mean we go and access a lower privilege role. It's always we want to escalate to a higher privileges. So access the admin or higher privileged roles. Use user session with multiple roles if you're not seeing result with a single role. Yeah, because sometimes the checks may differ when there are multiple roles assigned to a user. Yeah. Also use like composite roles. Sometimes like, there are like roles that consist of that combines different roles together. So they may have very different permission checks. So it helps you basically bypass many of the times. Yeah. Also, don't forget to use a user with no roles, because sometimes there are all privileges and checks, but if there are no roles, there are no checks as well sometimes, and it leads to bypasses. Also, it's not just limited to roles. There are always like admin functions. Even if our applications are not using roles, there will always be admin functions that are on the services. So try to identify those admin APIs and then access those using a non-privileged or lower privileged user session. And also, there is a very interesting attack vector that can gain you great advantages, revoking privileges of other higher privileged roles. So if you see uh, uh, basically different uh, privileges, different roles, you can basically try revoking them and for the other higher privileged users and see if they are able to still access or not. Broken authentication, very simple, but I'll just quickly go through. Use a token from another service. Yeah, because JOT, the audience payload is not validated. You can use an expired token or a refresh token from another service. You can request a new access token for current service, or even reuse the session tokens after logout. So this will all give you like token reuse access. Yeah. And basic authentications try to like remove the password from the basic authentication. Rate limit and 2FAs are very simple attacks on those. Token confusion is a very interesting one where you can basically get use tokens from another service and uh, use them to like for the authentication mechanism is not restricted. Many services share authentication verifiers, and that will basically help you do a token confusion attack. And you can also like repeat the same token in like cookie auth header, or even use a different high privileged token that is expired, or use authentication mechanism of another service along with the current one that the current service uses. And this is like token predictions. You may see a birth plugin called Sequencer. Learn to use that. It will help you gain randomness in the tokens and even predict them. The last part that I really want to cover is the parameter tampering. Basically, it covers mass assignment. So if you want to discover, as we looked before, like look for the params of interest in synonymous HTTP requests like put, post, patch. All of these endpoints may have different parameters that they are resulting in, but all of these parameters together can be used for basically attacks. And even the GraphQL uh, query or mutation around the different requests and responses. Also, try to inject like invalid config in the GraphQL. Clairvoyance tool does it really well. So even you can use that to discover GraphQL params. So once you have the params, you'll be able to like basically craft parameter pollution attacks, like repeating the parameter either in the URL or the query param or even in the body. And also don't try to don't forget to try the URL param in the body for a param that is occurring in a header, like header or in a URL. And also use like chained attack vectors. Basically, like if you have a payload, you can change the encoding of that and change the content type and try to send a XML or like a X form URL encoded instead of a JSON, because many of the implementations handle all kinds of requests and responses. Yeah. Also check for deprecated APIs. And then there is mass assignment. So we have like you add the payload, similar structure, try query in params in both. Also use nested objects. Like there are nested objects that will help you. Like if there is a user object that is being sent it in a JSON form, you will realize there is also like data user and then again another user. Use inject in the nested JSONs as well, and you will see amazing results with those. Yeah. Also mimic the behavior from very different APIs. Be persistent. There is always a way with mass assignment. It's also a very common vulnerability. Also used all the other chains that we discussed before. Yeah. And fuzzing, you would have come around, like you can use bump intruder, zap, wrestler. There are like fixed values that you need to provide in case of fuzzing or even scrapping. But don't forget special character processing, because many times inserting special characters can cause very unexpected behaviors. I have like found more than 5,000 bugs using this. So it's really very important that you search for special character handling as well. And this is a very interesting one, like API induced DOS. You'll be able to sometimes like remove a parameter or like repeat the parameter header or cookie, or even like in the request. And sometimes the application may crash with an 500, or it may like, and this way you can actually induce a DOS attack. Even invalid URIs sometimes can lead to SSRF, or even the nested JSON representation vulnerabilities. I've added a link here if you want to take over. I can send the slides. Yeah. So you'll be able to induce attacks like API induced DOS attacks. I think we are already reaching over time, so I'll just be very quick with the last one. Yeah. So there is this OAuth attacks. Basically, if you like every service may have this .well-known/OpenID configuration. This gives you all kinds of scopes that are supported, and even all the different kinds of response types. So if you are able to, if you want to attack on this OAuth vectors, you can like for the authorization code use, you can reuse an already existing code and try to see if you are able to gain access, or even you can use an authorization code that is old but should not be expired. Like say someone created 2 times the request for authorization, so that will generate 2 codes. But if the authorization code has not expired, you may be able to like use it again because the older one has not been expired. Yeah. Similarly, scope upgrade is a very important attack that is coming up today. We are seeing this in enterprises. So when what happens is the scope validations are not performed. So because of that, you will be able to add more scopes than that already exist. You'll also be able to upgrade the scopes in the grant flow, like in step 1 of the authorization, you send scopes, you'll be able to upgrade it there, or even in the step 4, basically when the authorization code has been granted and it is being redirected to the application, you can intercept that and upgrade the scopes. So you'll be able to gain higher privileges and do privilege escalation attacks. And the last one, very simple, very well known, like state tampering. Delete the state parameter or even change the state parameter to another user's flow. Yeah. And verify, don't forget to verify the logged in user is same or the other one. Yeah. Even the redirect URIs, you can sometimes try relative URIs because the implementations differ very much. Even subdomain confusions, or even host or referrer header injections. You can read about this. These are like very interesting attack vectors. Yeah. So I think, yeah, almost done. We have like dynamic client registration in SSRF, which is like in OAuth, which OAuth 2.0, which is like a SSRF by design. So do look for that. Like this is a very interesting attack vector. Anywhere there is dynamic client registration, you will be able to craft SSRF, because like whitelisting never succeeds, or even blacklisting in this case. Yeah. Zero-day hunting. Read the RFCs. Like even if you don't know what to attack, if you don't feel confident enough, just go and read the RFCs. It gives you great resources. Also search for should not, must not in the RFCs for a quick win. Like I've just added an example here. Yeah. If you see like parameters sent without a value must be treated as if they were omitted from the request. The authorization server must ignore unrecognized request parameters. Request and response parameters must not be included more than once. Now, all of this can be done. Since they said must not be done or must be done, you should understand like many of the times the frameworks or applications do not get developed very compliant with the RFC. So there are bugs, and this is where you find the bugs in the difference in implementations. So hopefully, yeah, I have brought you closer to your targets. Of course, I may not be able to like directly make you hit the bullseye, but yeah, brought you closer to your targets. Yeah, with this knowledge, and let me know if you have questions.
Yes, let's ask the questions in the Q&A part so that we can go one by one showing on the stage. You can hover over to the Q&A section in the top right. So, Roshan, that was a lovely session by you. We have some questions coming up. Let's let me put them on the stage. Yes, by Wormsec.
Okay, yeah, I see. Is automating a viable option for API testing? Yeah. Yes, it is a viable option, but it doesn't give you like 100% results. You would require like a very uh, like dedicated automation regarding with your services that you're testing, and it may not be very reusable for like other uh, services, but if they are in similar structure, you may be even be able to reuse them. But yes, always do automate. I'm not saying don't automate, always do automate, but don't forget the manual method. In the end, the manual methods can never like be outdone by the automations.
That's great. So let's take up another question that is available. Yes.
Yeah, bug bounty hunters. Yeah, as I said, yeah, discover. So if you know your assets, you'll be able to basically uh, do attacks better. Even like you have a larger attack surface as well. So discover. I would say discover always.
Jason, hope you get the answer, your question get answered. So we have another question from Ainan. So let me put that on the stage.
Yeah, I think I just answered this one. Yeah, I'm sorry, I was seeing something different.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, for a complete beginner in API hacking, how and where would you recommend this start? Okay, so this is a very like interesting area. API hacking is like nothing different from like web application hacking that existed before. So if you like complete beginner, learn from the basics, like learn about protocols, learn how interaction happen, uh, read. Don't like go ahead and start reading all the entire RFCs as you might get bored, but yeah, always read the RFCs when you're doing attacks, because this will give you like interesting thoughts that others may have missed or uh, not thought of. So this will also enrich your knowledge around like what are the APIs, different protocols. Yeah, so this is uh, a great way to like begin your career.
Great. Hope Pushpinder, hope your question is answered. Let's move on to the next question we have from Sahil.
Yes. So if you see like all the IDOs that exist, they exist because of this design of APIs. Yeah. And that is their fundamental. Like you forget the authorization checks and there is an IDO. So almost everywhere you find, like every researcher, you will say which common vulnerability. Even I've like asked every researcher that I've met, yeah, they say IDOR or like Bola, yeah. So this is like a very common vulnerability. That's why it exists in the OWASP, first in the OWASP top 10, the API top 10.
Got it. So I think we have one more question also coming from Thakur. Yeah. Let me just bring in this. Yeah.
Okay, how to
From
find API
Deepesh.
yeah, okay, how to find API documentations and endpoints of targets. Yeah, so API documentations sometimes it may not be easily accessible from like public endpoint. So you may like go ahead and try creating an account to access their documentation portals. Sometimes you may even register for the sandboxes environment if they provide. That way you will not just be able to find API documentations, but also find how the APIs are interacting and even examples to use them. So that way you are able to collect your assets.
That's great. So we have one more question coming from Shashank. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So dynamic registration in OAuth 2.0, there's like an entire RFC on this. So you will be able to read this. Like the dynamic registration allows any client. Like you have always seen, like in the OAuth there is a client ID and a client secret through which you interact from the backend with the authorization server. Yeah, from the server side. Yeah, and that application that is interacting now, that becomes dynamic. So what happens is the redirect URI that exists in the dynamic in the client becomes dynamic because of that registration virtue. Because since the client itself is dynamic, you will be able to create uh, dynamic redirect URIs when you're registering the application. And since it's your control, you may be able to change attack vectors like XSS or like many of the other attack vectors. So you can execute not just SSRF, but even client side attacks through those, because the redirect URI is in your control.
Got it. So Thakur, yeah, Thakur is back here.
So it's no different. Like we don't think in terms of technology. It's no different like being in Ruby on Rails or Golang or Python. Yeah, all you need to understand is like how the APIs are being processed. So if you like want to proceed further, just learn about the API structure in itself and basically the functions that they are executing. So Ruby and Rails is no difference, but there is one interesting attack vectors that I've heard of in Ruby on Rails is where you're able to insert an entire objects into the processing because of differences. I have never tried it myself. It was one of my colleague who made me aware of it. But yeah, that is an interesting point on Ruby on Rails API attacks.
Cool. So we have another question from Godson.
Okay, we are seeing this, but this is also bringing a very interesting observation, because with GraphQL, what happens is there's no limit to the request, or like there is like GraphQL in terms brings a lot of complexity along with the simplicity. So observability becomes really low, because as a developer, like as a user, you are not able to see everything clearly. But the same happens for, let's say, the QA tester or like the developer that exists. They may miss out on that because it's not everything is being served from a single endpoint. So how do you segregate everything together and test it? Sometimes you may miss between like uh, basically when you have like bulk queries or mutations. In those cases, may not be handled. So uh, it's a it's happening, but it's also bringing a lot more complexity along with the simplicity of GraphQL.
That's great. So we'll be taking one more question. That will be the last one. And any more questions, you can just uh, talk with Roshan by hopping onto a table on our lounge or a networking area. So yeah, Roshan, please go.
Yeah, I didn't get your question, Sashank. Would you want to clarify more? Yeah.
Okay. Shashank, please reiterate the question again. Okay. Let's take one last one later more. Yeah.
Yeah. So as always, like most found issues is Bola or IDOR. Yeah. And like interesting findings is like chain. There is always this chain attacks that you may be able to like, uh, let's say there is a Bola or IDOR, but with that you can actually gain a full account takeover, or like even gain admin access. That is something my colleague was able to do. So this is like really uh, interesting findings that we are able to see with AP.
Cool. So Vishal, I think Roshan has answered your question. So yes, guys. So that's it. And thank you very much, Roshan, for hosting this session for us. And if you could just stop your, just let me stop the screening. So our next session will be live in around 15-20 minutes. Uh, till then, talk with Roshan by hopping onto a lounge or networking area we have at the reception area. So feel free to get in touch with Roshan there. We'll get back to you in the see you in the next event. Okay, Roshan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye bye. See you in the